How many times have you felt guilty for not being able to maintain friendships? For preferring to be alone rather than forcing conversations that lead nowhere? For feeling that the people around you are stuck in shallow, repetitive, empty dialogues, and you just can't pretend to be interested anymore? Society has taught you that this is a flaw, that you need to try harder, go out more, be more sociable, more available, more palatable. But what if I told you that having few or no friends may actually be the silent symptom of something that few have the courage to face? You are living on a different frequency. And no, this isn't cheap romanticization of loneliness. It's philosophy applied to your real pain, to your concrete experience of not fitting into a world obsessed with likes, crowded WhatsApp groups, and weekends that need to be shared to be valid. Today we're going to dissect 5 personality traits that lonely people share, but that society prefers to ignore because they expose an uncomfortable truth. Not everyone who is alone is lost. Some simply no longer fit into the boxes that modern culture has prepared for them. And the price of this awareness is high, but it is also the only way to truly live. Get ready, because this will shake up everything you've been taught about friendship, belonging, and what really matters in a well-lived life. Let's start with the most misunderstood trait of all, the one that everyone applauds in theory but punishes in practice: authenticity. Have you noticed how everyone says they want authentic people around, but the first time you dare to be genuinely yourself, the chairs around the table start to empty? There's a reason for that, and it's more cruel than it seems. Being authentic is not a neutral choice. It is a silent declaration of war against the invisible social contract that keeps relationships functioning. Because the truth is that most friendships are not built on truth. They are built on convenience, on the ability to wear social masks that don't bother anyone. You smile when you should be tired. You agree when you should disagree. You feign enthusiasm when you feel indifference. And everyone around you does the same. It's a collective theater where no one can step out of character without being kicked off the stage. Sociologist Irving Goffman called this the presentation of self in everyday life. The idea that we all wear different personas depending on the social setting we're in. It's not necessarily a lie. It's adaptation, survival. The problem is that when you develop the ability, or the curse, to be authentic, you lose the ability to act. And that's when isolation begins. Because people don't know what to do with someone who isn't playing the game. You become unpredictable, uncomfortable, dangerous even, because your mere presence reminds others that they are pretending, and no one likes to be confronted with their own falseness. Nietzsche had a name for people like this: free spirits. In the book Human All Too Human, he describes the free spirit as someone who thinks for themselves, who is not swayed by the opinions of the majority, who dares to question the truths accepted by everyone. But Nietzsche did not romanticize this. He knew that the free spirit pays a very high price: loneliness. Because the herd, the mass of people who think, act, and feel collectively, does not tolerate those who deviate. The herd needs conformity to function. And you, by being authentic, are breaking the pact. You are saying, with your very existence, I don't need your approval to be who I am. And that is intolerable to those who still depend on that approval to feel alive. Then you begin to notice a pattern. People drift away. Not dramatically, not with fights or open conflicts. They just disappear. They stop calling you. They stop responding with the same enthusiasm. And you're left there wondering, what's wrong with me? The answer is harsh but liberating. There's nothing wrong with you. What there is a fundamental mismatch between who you are and what most people are willing to put up with. Because authenticity requires reciprocity. It requires the other person to take off their mask too. And most people simply don't want to. Not because they're bad people, but because living with a mask is easier. It's less risky. It's socially rewarded. Think about how many times you've heard someone say, be yourself. But when you really try, when you reveal your true opinions, your strange tastes, your real vulnerabilities, what happens? People back away. They wanted you to be authentic, within acceptable limits. They wanted your truth, as long as it didn't bother them. They wanted to know who you really are, but only the pretty parts, the parts that confirm what they already think. Complete authenticity? That's scary, because when you're genuinely yourself, you force others to be themselves too. And most people don't know who they are underneath all the layers of social conditioning. And here comes the part that no one tells you. Being authentic isn't just a matter of courage. It's also a matter of emotional privilege. You have to be willing to trade quantity for quality. You have to accept that your Friday nights may be quiet, that you won't have 20 people at your birthday party, that there will be moments when loneliness will hurt so much that you'll wonder if it wouldn't be easier to just pretend. Get back in the game, put the mask back on, and maybe you'll even try. But once you wake up to your own truth, going back to sleep becomes impossible. It's like trying to unsee something you've already seen. The taste of authenticity is addictive. even when it costs you everything. Then you learn something vital. Authenticity doesn't give you more friends. It gives you fewer friends, but the right ones. And that natural filter, that emotional screening that happens when you stop pretending, is actually a gift disguised as loss. Because every person who walks away when you show who you really are was there for the edited version of you. And you don't need friends who love an illusion. You need people who see you in your entirety, with all your contradictions, all your rough edges, and choose to stay. And those people are rare, extremely rare. And that brings us to the next trait, one that is even more frightening for those who live in a culture of chronic emotional dependence. Because authenticity alone doesn't explain everything. There's something deeper going on, something most people avoid as if it were a death sentence. The terrifying, liberating, and misunderstood independence of not needing anyone else to feel whole. Emotional independence is a concept that everyone applauds in motivational quotes, but that almost no one really wants around them. Because when you meet someone who genuinely doesn't need external validation, who doesn't beg for attention, who doesn't despair when they're alone, you don't feel admiration. You feel discomfort. Sometimes even fear, because that person reminds you of something you've hidden from yourself, your own dependence, the way you depend on others to feel relevant, loved, worthy. And when someone doesn't need that, when someone has found within themselves a source of satisfaction that doesn't depend on others, it destabilizes the entire social dynamic around them. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer had a brutal view on this. He said that loneliness is the fate of exceptional spirits, not because they are better, but because they have learned something that most refuse to learn: how to be with themselves without collapsing. Schopenhauer believed that most people flee from solitude because when they are alone, they are forced to face their own mediocrity, their own emptiness. So they fill their lives with distractions, people, noise, anything to avoid looking inward. But you, who have developed emotional independence, have learned to do the opposite. You have learned to sit in silence and not feel panic. You have learned that the company of your own thoughts is not a punishment. It is in fact a luxury. But here's the paradox. The more independent you become, the more people accuse you of being cold, distant, inaccessible, because society confuses independence with indifference. If you're not desperate for connection, it must be because you don't care about anyone, right? Wrong. Emotional independence doesn't mean you don't love. It means you love from a different place, not from neediness, but from abundance. You don't connect with people because you need them to fill a hole inside you. You connect because you choose to, and that difference is everything. Think about it. How many friendships have you seen that work like this? An emotionally dependent person who calls all the time, who needs constant reassurance, who freaks out if you take too long to reply to a message. At first, it may even seem like love, care, deep connection. But over time, you realize it's not love, it's suction. It's someone trying to use you as an emotional crutch. And when you're not available for that role, the person falls apart. That's not friendship, it's codependency. And you, who have developed independence, simply can no longer participate in these dynamics. Not because you're superior, but because you know that this type of relationship is a prison disguised as intimacy. What's more, emotional independence gives you something rare in modern times: the real freedom to choose your own life. While most people make decisions based on what will my friends think, how will I explain this to others, you have taken back control of the narrative of your life. You don't have to justify your choices to an invisible audience. You don't have to perform happiness on social media to prove you're okay. You simply are. And that in itself is revolutionary. But I'll tell you a secret that no one talks about. Developing emotional independence was not your choice. Not entirely. Often it is born out of wounds, out of repeated disappointments, out of moments when you reached out and no one held your hand. From times when you needed someone and realized that in the end you only had yourself. And then you learned. You learned that depending on others is a risk that hurts too much. So you built walls, internal fortresses. And today, when someone tries to get in, you hesitate. Not because you don't want connection, but because you know the price of letting someone in and then having to rebuild everything yourself when that person leaves. So the real question isn't, why are you so independent? The real question is, what hurt you so much that you had to learn not to need anyone? And that question, my friend, opens a door that few have the courage to walk through. Because behind independence, there is often a scar, a memory of abandonment, a broken promise, an absence that hurt so much that you swore to yourself, never again. And then you became that person, self-sufficient, strong, whole on your own. But sometimes deep in the night, you still ask yourself, did I choose this? Or was this all I had left? And it is precisely this independence that gives you access to something rare, dangerous, and powerful, the luxury of choice. But choose what exactly? Choose who deserves to enter your life. And here comes the most misunderstood, most judged and most necessary trait of all, selectivity. That word alone carries a lot of weight, doesn't it? When someone calls you selective, it's rarely a compliment. It's almost always a disguised accusation. You're too demanding. You're hard to please. You don't give people a chance. As if choosing who you spend your energy on were a moral flaw. As if you should be available to anyone who comes along, regardless of how that person treats you, what they bring to your life, or whether they even respect you. But I'll tell you something that few have the courage to admit. Selectivity is not arrogance. It's wisdom. It's self-preservation. It's the only way to protect your peace in a world that wants to suck every drop of your attention, your time, your soul. When you have few friends, it's not because you reject everyone for sadistic pleasure. It's because you've learned, often in the worst possible way, that not all company is worthwhile. That there are people who come into your life just to drain you, to use you as a stepping stone, as an audience, as an unpaid therapist. And you, after so many times being left empty by relationships that only worked in one direction, have developed something precious. Discernment. The ability to recognize, sometimes in a matter of minutes, whether that person will add to or subtract from your life. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, spoke of a process he called individuation, the path by which a person becomes who they really are, separating themselves from collective expectations and social masks. And an inevitable part of this process is selectivity. Because the more you know yourself, the more you understand your values, your needs, your limits, the less tolerance you have for the superficial. You have less patience for people who can't go beyond conversations about the weather, gossip, or nothing at all. You're not being snobbish. You're being true to who you've become. And that naturally drives away those who can't keep up with that depth. Aristotle knew this more than 2,000 years ago. He divided friendships into 3 types. Friendships of utility, based on mutual convenience. Friendships of pleasure, based on fun and entertainment. And friendships of virtue, based on mutual respect, shared values, and joint growth. And he was clear. Only the 3rd type is true friendship. The other 2 are circumstantial, temporary, replaceable. But friendship of virtue, that is rare, extremely rare. And you, by being selective, are looking for exactly that. You don't want someone who only shows up when they need something. You don't want someone who is only there for superficial fun. You want someone who sees you, who understands you, who grows with you. But here's the problem. Most people don't want that kind of friendship. Because virtue friendship requires effort. It requires honesty. It requires you to be someone worthy of respect. And that's hard. It's much easier to have 10 superficial friends who validate you without question than to have one true friend who challenges you to be better. So when you set high standards, when you say no to those who don't meet those standards, people see you as the problem. You think you're better than everyone else. No, you just know what you deserve. And if that bothers them, it's not your problem. There's a huge difference between being alone because you push everyone away for fear of intimacy and being alone because you refuse to settle for emotional crumbs. And you need to be honest with yourself about which one you are. Because healthy selectivity comes from a place of self-love. It says, I respect myself too much to accept just any treatment. But defensive selectivity comes from a place of unhealed wounds. It says, I'm going to reject you before you reject me. And that second version isn't wisdom. It's fear. And you need to know the difference. But assuming your selectivity comes from a healthy place, let's talk about what it really does for you. It creates space. Emotional space, mental space, energetic space. When you're not spending your energy on people who don't deserve it, you have more of yourself to give to those who really matter. More of yourself to invest in yourself. More inner silence to hear your own voice. And it is precisely in this space, in this silence, that the next trait is born, perhaps the most powerful of all. Because while the world desperately chases noise, stimuli, anything that fills the void, you have learned to do something that few can. Dive inward. Introspection. The ability to look inward. To sit alone with your thoughts without feeling like you're being punished. To navigate your inner world with the same curiosity that people navigate social media. This is not common. In fact, it's extremely rare. We live in an era of constant escape. Everyone is running away from themselves through endless series, infinite scrolling, compulsive work, empty relationships, anything to avoid having to stop and ask, who am I when no one is looking? What do I really feel? What do I really want? But you, who have learned to live with few friends, have developed something that most people don't have. Total access to your own inner universe. Socrates, the Greek philosopher considered one of the fathers of Western thought, had a simple maxim: know thyself. But he wasn't saying this in a motivational way. He was saying that self-knowledge is the basis of everything. You can't live a good life if you don't know who you are. You can't make wise decisions if you don't understand your own motivations. You can't build healthy relationships if you don't recognize your destructive patterns. And how do you know yourself? Through introspection, through hours, days, years alone with yourself, exploring your thoughts, your fears, your deepest desires. And here's the truth that no one wants to hear. Introspection hurts. Because when you really look inside, you don't just find beauty, you find shadows. You find contradictions. You find parts of yourself that you don't want to admit exist. You find the envy you never confessed, the resentment you hid, the hurt you said you got over but it's still there throbbing. Carl Jung called this the shadow. All the aspects of our personality that we repress because they don't fit the image we want to have of ourselves. And most people spend their whole lives running away from their own shadow. But you, in forced or chosen solitude, had no choice but to face it. And you know what happens when you do that? When you really look at your darkest parts and say, okay, this is also me, you become whole. Not perfect, whole. You stop projecting your wounds onto others. You stop blaming the world for things that are your responsibility. You stop living in denial. And that, my friend, puts you light years ahead of most people who are still running away from themselves. But there's more. Introspection doesn't just give you self-knowledge. It gives you something even more valuable: autonomy. When you know your own thoughts, when you understand where your impulses, your reactions, your emotions come from, you stop being controlled by them. You create a space between the stimulus and the response. Someone offends you, and instead of reacting automatically, you pause. You observe. You ask, why did that hurt me so much? What old wound did it touch? And then you choose how to respond. That is freedom. That is real power. And if you've made it this far, if you've recognized these traits in yourself, the authenticity that isolated you, the independence that freed you, the selectivity that protected you, the introspection that revealed you, then I need to tell you something important, something that can completely change the way you look at your loneliness. If you like this content, if it touched something real in you, then leave a like here on the video. It's not about algorithms. It's not about numbers. It's about you telling me, I saw it, I understood it, I recognized myself. And subscribe to the channel, because what we're building here isn't entertainment. It's a space for those who are tired of pretending, for those who want to really think, for those who have realized that the life everyone sold you doesn't work and are now looking for their own path. And I promise to keep bringing you content that does that makes you think, that makes you feel, that wakes you up. Because this journey of self-discovery has a dark side that no one tells you about in the beginning. And that's what we need to talk about now. Because so far I've shown you the traits, validated you, told you that there's nothing wrong with you. But now I need to show you the other side of the coin, the part that hurts, the part that philosophy alone can't solve. Because all these traits, authenticity, independence, selectivity, introspection, they come at a cost. And that cost has a name: evolution, personal growth, awakening of consciousness. All these terms sound beautiful, inspiring, even desirable. But no one tells you what it really means to evolve while the world around you remains the same. No one prepares you for the isolation that comes when you start to see things that others don't yet see. When you stop laughing at jokes you used to find funny because you now see the cruelty behind them. When you can no longer participate in conversations that used to fill your afternoons because they now sound hollow, shallow, repetitive. Personal growth is not a glorious journey toward enlightenment. It is often a lonely walk to a place where few want to go. Nietzsche had a brutal metaphor for this. He talked about those who fight monsters and how easy it is to become a monster in the process. He said, and if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. What was he trying to say? That the process of self-knowledge, of growth, of facing your own shadows transforms you. And not always in ways that the world will applaud. You become more aware, yes, but also more critical, more intolerant of mediocrity, more uncomfortable in environments that were once familiar. And the people around you sense this. They feel that you have changed, and they don't like it, because here's the uncomfortable truth. When you evolve, you become a mirror for those who haven't. Your mere existence reminds others that they could be doing more, being more, living more. And instead of inspiring them, it often irritates them. It's easier to accuse you of having changed, of having become boring, of thinking you're better than everyone else, than to admit that they are stagnant. So you find yourself in an impossible position. Either you dim your light so as not to disturb others, or you accept that growing up inevitably means growing away from some people. The Roman philosopher Seneca, another name for Stoicism, said something powerful about this. He believed that resistance is an opportunity for virtue, that obstacles, difficulties, moments of loneliness are not punishments, but tests, chances for you to prove to yourself what you are made of. And having few friends because you are growing, that is a test of resilience, of integrity, of faith in yourself. Because it's much easier to regress, to return to the herd, to embrace comfortable mediocrity. But you don't do that. You keep growing even when it hurts, even when it means nights alone, even when it means losing people you loved. And there's something crucial that needs to be said here. Growth is not linear. It's not a ladder you climb and then you're done, you've arrived. It's a cycle. You grow, then you regress a little, then you grow again. You have profound insights on Monday, and by Thursday you're back to the same destructive patterns. And that's normal. That's human. The problem is that modern culture has sold us the idea that personal growth is a quick, radical, permanent transformation. That you'll go to therapy for 6 months, read 3 self-help books, and that's it. You're a new person. But that's not how it works. Real growth is slow. It's frustrating. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you, who have few friends, have probably been on this journey longer than most. And that's why you're further ahead, but also more tired. Because that's the price of lucidity. You can no longer live on autopilot. You can no longer pretend you don't see. You see the manipulations, you see the masks, you see the power games, you see the falsehood. And you can no longer participate as if none of this mattered. So you walk away, not with superiority, with exhaustion. Because keeping your consciousness active all the time is tiring. It's a burden you carry alone. And sometimes, just sometimes, you ask yourself, was it worth waking up? Wasn't I happier when I didn't know all this? And there's the question that matters. The question that defines everything. Are you alone because you're evolving, or because you're using evolution as an excuse to avoid intimacy? Are you truly growing, or are you just isolating yourself and calling it wisdom? Because there's a fine line between being selective and being defensive, between being profound and being inaccessible, between growing and being stuck in a narrative of superiority that protects you from the pain of being vulnerable. And that distinction, my friend, is everything. And that's what we need to talk about now. Because so far, I've shown you the philosophical beauty of loneliness. But I haven't told you the part that really hurts. Let's stop romanticizing it. Because so far, I've shown you the philosophy, given you the concepts, validated you with thinkers who have turned loneliness into wisdom. But I would be dishonest if I didn't tell you the raw truth. Loneliness hurts. It hurts in a way that no theory can completely numb. It hurts when you see photos of groups of friends laughing together and you're at home, alone, again. It hurts when it's your birthday and you can count on one hand how many people really care. It hurts when you have a victory and no one to celebrate with. It hurts when you're going through something difficult and you realize you have no one to call. And it hurts even more when you ask yourself, could the problem really be me? Because here's the cruelest trap of all. You can understand intellectually that your traits are not flaws. You can agree with everything I've said so far. But on quiet nights when loneliness sets in, all that philosophy disappears, and what remains is doubt. The inner voice that whispers, maybe you're just fooling yourself. Maybe you're just impossible to love. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you're selective when in fact no one would choose you anyway. And that doubt, it eats away at you. It turns chosen loneliness into unconfessed shame. And there's more. There's a huge difference between chosen loneliness and imposed loneliness. Between being alone because you haven't found people who are right for you, and being alone because you're so afraid of being hurt that you build insurmountable walls. And you need to be brutally honest with yourself about which of the two you are experiencing. Because if you are using the concepts of authenticity, independence, and selectivity as a shield against vulnerability, then you are not evolving. You are hiding. And calling fear wisdom does not make it any less fear. I'll tell you something that few admit. It is possible to be so protected that you become inaccessible. It's possible to be so independent that you forget how to receive. It's possible to be so selective that you reject genuine connections over insignificant details, because deep down, you're testing people to see if they'll give up on you, thus confirming your belief that you're too hard to love. And that's not growth. It's self-sabotage disguised as high standards. So the real question isn't, why do I have so few friends? The real question is, am I alone because I'm waiting for true connections? Or because I'm so afraid of being truly seen that I prefer safe solitude to risky intimacy? And that question, my friend, hurts more than any other. Because if the answer is the second option, it means you're using your intelligence, your awareness, your philosophical depth as armor. And armor protects, yes, but it also imprisons. There's a devastating paradox here. You need authenticity to attract the right people, but authenticity requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is terrifying when you've been hurt before. So you get stuck in a cycle. You don't open up because you're afraid of getting hurt. But by not opening up, you ensure that you'll never form deep bonds, which confirms your belief that you're destined for loneliness. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the cruelest part? You don't even realize you're doing it. But there's another side to this coin. Maybe you're really doing everything right. Maybe you really are authentic, independent, selective, and introspective in the healthiest way possible. And yet you're alone. And do you know why? Because the world isn't ready for people like you. Because most people are still stuck in games you've already outgrown. Because finding someone who operates on the same frequency as you is statistically rare. And in that case, loneliness isn't a punishment. It's the temporary price of being ahead of your time. But that doesn't make the pain any less real. It just makes the pain harder to explain. So what do you do with that? How do you differentiate healthy loneliness from destructive isolation? How do you know if you should keep waiting for the right people or if you should let your guard down a little and learn to accept imperfect connections? How do you balance the need to protect your peace with the human need to belong? Because that's the tension that no one solves with philosophy. That's the contradiction you carry in your chest every day. And it's about this contradiction, this impossible balance, that we need to talk about now. Because the answer isn't in choosing one side or the other. The answer is in learning to dance between the two. So let's get to the final truth. The most important one of all. The one that transforms everything you've learned so far from theory into practice. From philosophy into life. You don't have to choose between being authentic and having connections. You don't have to choose between protecting your peace and opening up to people. What you need is to learn the difference between conscious solitude and destructive isolation. And that difference, my friend, is everything. Conscious solitude is when you are alone because you recognize that at this moment there are no people around you who truly understand you. It's when you prefer silence to falsehood. It's when you use that time alone to grow, to create, to dive into yourself. It's an active choice. You're alone, but you're not running away. You're waiting. You're preparing. You know that when the right people show up, you'll be ready. And until then, you won't settle for less than you deserve. Destructive isolation is different. It's when you're alone because you're afraid. Afraid of being seen. Afraid of being judged. Afraid of being abandoned again. So you build walls so high that even you can't see beyond them. You call it selectivity, but it's paralysis. You call it independence, but it's disconnection. You call it authenticity, but it's an edited version of yourself that never risks showing your real vulnerabilities. And worst of all, you convince yourself that this is okay, that you don't need anyone, that you're stronger alone. But deep down, in a part of yourself that you try not to listen to, you know you're lying to yourself. So how do you get out of this? How do you turn isolation into conscious solitude? First, you stop using philosophy as an excuse. You stop hiding behind Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Jung. These thinkers didn't create theories for you to isolate yourself from the world. They created them to help you understand the world and yourself better. But understanding isn't enough. You need to take action. And taking action, in this case, means taking risks again. It means accepting that yes, you can be hurt again. That not every connection will last forever. That some people will disappoint you. But it also means accepting that without a risk, there is no reward. That the best things in life, love, friendship, belonging, only exist on the other side of vulnerability. And you don't have to open up to everyone. You don't have to tear down all your walls. You just need to leave a door ajar. For the right people. For the right moments. For the connections that really matter. Aristotle was right. Friendships of virtue are rare. But they do exist. And you won't find them if you never leave the fortress you've built around yourself. So the first practical step, the step that changes everything, is this. Allow yourself to be imperfect with people. Allow yourself to show not only your strengths but your weaknesses. Allow yourself to ask for help. Allow yourself to say, I feel lonely, without wrapping it up in 10 layers of philosophical theory. Because when you do that, when you allow yourself to be human, you give others permission to be human too. And that's when the magic happens. Second step, stop expecting people to understand you completely. No one will understand you 100%. You don't even understand yourself 100%. And that's okay. Connection isn't about total understanding. It's about acceptance. It's about finding someone who, even though they don't understand everything, chooses to stay, chooses to try, chooses to see you as you are and say, I don't have to agree with everything, but I respect you. And that's enough. And third, use your loneliness as a tool, not as an identity. You are not the lonely person. You are not the lone wolf. You are not the one who doesn't need anyone. You are a person who at this point in your life has few friends, and that can change. And when it does, you won't be betraying who you are. You will be allowing who you are to evolve. Because growth isn't just about getting stronger on your own. It's also about learning to be strong with someone by your side. So here's your liberation. You don't have to choose between being yourself and having connections. You just need to find people who allow you to be both at the same time. And while you're not finding them, use that time to become the person you would like to have as a friend. Be the depth you seek, Be the authenticity you value. Be the presence you would like to receive. And when the right people show up, and they will, you'll be ready. Not perfect. Ready. And there's a huge difference between the two. Now answer me one thing. In all honesty, are you alone because you're evolving or because you're avoiding? Leave it in the comments. You don't have to expose your entire life. But if this video touched on something real, share a piece of your truth, because maybe someone here needs to read exactly what you have to say. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit codes are ready for you. The link is in the video description. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit. In the end, having few friends is neither a virtue nor a defect. It's a mirror that reflects who you really are when no one is looking. And if you recognize yourself in these 5 traits, know this: you're not wrong. You're awake, and waking up hurts, but it's the only way to truly live. Now the choice is yours. Will you go back to sleep, or will you learn to live with your eyes open?